What do you suppose these boys are doing driving this car? They aren't old enough to drive. Still, they seem to be doing a good job of it, don't they?
And where do you boys think you're going?
Hi, Dad. Oh, we are just practicing our driving.
Practicing your driving? Now, you're not trying to tell me you know how to drive a car, are you?
Sure, Dad. Just watch this. First, you put this lever in neutral, then you turn on the key, then you step in the starter to get the engine going. Then you put in the clutch, put it in gear, and step in the gas. How's that?
Well, that's pretty good as far as it goes. That's just the mechanical part of it. There's a lot more to driving than just making the car go. There are many other things that you have to know before you can drive a car. Important things like traffic rules and regulations.
Oh, we know how important the traffic rules are. Our coach has been teaching us. We have a regular class every week where we study the traffic rules and lots of other things about our bikes.
We call it learning to drive our bikes. Coach says we have to follow all the same traffic regulations as the cars, so that if we learn all the regulations by driving our bikes, we'll be ready to drive a car when we're old enough.
Well, just exactly what do you mean, drive your bike?
Well, when we ride our bikes in the street, we're just as much a part of traffic as the cars. And if we do dangerous things, we could cause an accident, which might hurt other people as well as ourselves. That's why Coach says we should always drive our bikes like we would drive a car, and never do anything we wouldn't do if we were driving a real car. So you see, if we think about driving our bikes and always doing the safe thing, we're not as likely to get into trouble.
I see. Well, that sounds like a very good idea. I suppose you know everything about traffic regulations.
Well, maybe not everything, but we are learning a lot by driving our bikes.
All right. Let's see what you've learned. I suppose you know the hand signals for stopping and turning.
Sure. That's the first thing we learned. Left turn, right turn, stop. Yeah, and you're always supposed to give the signal quite a ways before you turn or stop.
That's right. What else have you learned?
Well, we have to obey all the stop signs and traffic lights. Coach says if we're going to share the streets, we must also share the responsibility.
Responsibility is a pretty big word. Do you know what it means to share the responsibility?
Yes. It means that everyone who uses the streets must be careful and considerate of everyone else.
You mean you have to look out for cars, just as they have to look out for you?
Sure. Although we're not as big as the cars, we're just as important in traffic, because we could cause an accident if we forgot to drive our bikes.
Yes, I guess that's right. Now I have another question to ask you. You don't go as fast as the automobile traffic. How does that work out?
Well, you see, we follow the rules for slow traffic and always stay on the right side of the street, and are careful to always stay in our own lane and not weave in and out. But in riding in the right-hand lane, we always have to be careful of cars pulling out into traffic and keep a sharp lookout for the sudden opening of doors.
Now, what about these boys I sometimes see riding others on their handlebars, or hitching rides on cars and trucks? Are they driving their bikes?
No. But you'll never see anyone from our school doing that. Coach says anyone who is really learning to drive their bike would just think how silly it would be if autos carried riders in front of the driver so he couldn't see where he was going.
Yes, when you think of it that way, it does seem a little silly, doesn't it? And just imagine what it would be like if an auto were to hitch a ride on a truck. That would really be dangerous, wouldn't it? You boys seem to know quite a bit about riding, or that is, driving your bikes. Tell me some more things you're learning.
Well, we learn to always keep a safe distance behind other bikes and cars, so if they stop suddenly, we won't run into them.
And we learn to slow down at all street crossings and look both ways before crossing the intersection. And always give pedestrians the right of way in crosswalks. because we move so much faster than they do that they might not be able to get out of our way. And we also learn that it's just as important to keep our bikes in good condition as it is to keep up a car.
Especially the brakes. They're the most important part of the bike to keep in good shape. If you can't get going, you can't get into much trouble. But once you're going and you can't stop, boy, you've really got trouble.
You're absolutely right there. You know, I've been wondering about something. Is all this just a lot of fancy talk, or do you really drive your bike?
Honest, Dad, we really do. We found that by driving our bikes, we keep ourselves out of a lot of trouble. Why, just the other day as I was going to school, I had an experience where driving my bike sure helped me. I was late getting started, and really had to hurry so I wouldn't be late for school. I thought I'd save time by cutting through the alley from Oakwood to Pine. You know that alley. Well, I was riding as fast as I could, but as I came to Pine Street, I suddenly thought, would I drive a car out of this alley into Pine Street as fast as I could go? That made me realize that it would be a very dangerous thing to do, so I slowed down and looked to see if anything was coming. And it's a good thing I did, as a car was coming down Pine Street and the driver wouldn't have seen me if I'd ridden out of the alley as fast as I was going without looking. I still got to school on time that morning, but if I hadn't been driving my bike, I might not have gotten there at all. So, driving my bike helped me avoid an accident and kept me out of trouble that time.
Yes, I can see it paid off in that case.
I had an experience like that one, except that I was able to keep from hurting someone else by driving my bike.
Oh, what happened, Bob?
One day I was riding along Kenneth Road. I'd just come down the long hill from Adams and had gotten up speed to make the long 2-block climb up to Washington. I was making good time when I saw 2 girls starting to cross the street. I knew if I stopped and lost my speed, it'd be a tough pump to get to the top of the hill. But I thought about driving my bike and decided what I'd do if I were driving a car, which was, of course, to stop and wait till the girls had crossed. It was lucky I saw them and stopped, as they might not have seen me and might have walked right in front of me. And when a car also stopped, it made me feel pretty good to know that I'd set an example for that driver.
Wasn't that good feeling you got from being courteous and considerate worth the extra effort it took to get to the top?
Yeah, I'll say it was. You know Tom Kelly, don't you, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I think so.
Well, he was telling me yesterday how he almost did a foolish thing before I remembered to drive his bike. He was coming over to my house after school and thought he'd save time by riding down the wrong side of the street so he wouldn't have to cross it twice. Then he thought how dangerous it'd be to drive a car down the wrong side of a busy street and how easy it'd be to cause an accident. He decided that wasn't a very good way to drive his bike and turned around and went back to the corner where he crossed in the crosswalk and rode down on the right side of the street. So you see, he probably avoided an accident by remembering to drive his bike. He might have been stopped by a cop, too.
Yes, that's right. Well, I have to get started for the office now, but I'd like to hear more about this later. It certainly seems to me you boys are doing a good job of driving your bikes. You're learning a lot of valuable and important things that will be very useful to you when you start to drive a car. In fact, you already know more about safe driving than most adult drivers. Well, so long.
Come on,
See you
go
tonight.
on. See you, Dad. Come on, fellas, we gotta get going to school.
Now we have learned that it's very important to know all the rules and regulations of traffic, and that it's even more important to know why we have the rules and why we must obey them. But the most important thing of all is to know how to drive your bike safely without stopping to think of rules to cover every situation. You might not have time to think of a rule, so always use your head and think about safety. Always be alert when driving your bikes, and you can avoid an accident in which you might get hurt. Always be courteous and considerate, and you can keep from hurting other people. And by starting now and learning to drive your bikes, you'll be able to drive an automobile when you're old enough, and you'll be able to do a good, safe job of it. But remember, drive your bike.